This Nebraska-Tennessee thing is wild. Actually, it's not.
No, Nebraska.
It doesn't really matter.
Nebraska's just getting dragged, and they should. And this is, I just think it's problematic with college football.
Yes.
And this is the issue here, in that we love college football, and college football is great. But for everyone that's bitching and moaning that college football is missing the point of, if you keep pissing off fans, eventually fans are going to get fed up with this. And Nebraska is doing something for, quote, their bottom line that is really doing a disservice to fans. And fans everywhere, including their own, are calling them out, and they should.
So what happened was
BS.
So Nebraska and Tennessee. This is crazy. This is a glaring indictment on college football.
Yes.
As much as we love college football, this right here is the root of its. Like if you, there's a lot of problems in college football, but if you had to pinpoint
this is the biggest.
This is the biggest one.
I think so.
That Nebraska and Tennessee have been trying to schedule a home-and-home for 20 years.
And they got it finally.
Well, they got it twice.
Yeah.
So they started talking in 2006. They set the dates for 2016, 2017. In 2013, they delayed it for a decade.
Yes.
So they pushed it to 2026, 2027. And now Nebraska just recently called those games off.
Yep.
They are citing stadium renovations.
Which is horse crap.
Tennessee is pissed about it. Nebraska only has to pay $500,000 to get out of it.
Yep.
Tennessee is like, well, now we're in a real pickle. Because it's just hard to schedule.
And it's hard to schedule real teams. Tennessee's going to end up having to schedule like Tennessee Tech.
Well, and that's what Nebraska's doing. They're replacing those two games with like Bowling Green and somebody else.
Nebraska basically is saying that because of renovations, they're going to have smaller seating, and they want more home games. So they're not going to go play at Tennessee. They're going to replace those games at Tennessee and the home games with the Bowling Greens of the world, saying that they need the income from those extra home games. And so instead of just going to play at Tennessee twice and having Tennessee come back to their place, they're just playing 4 patsies all at home, which is absolute horse crap.
But that doesn't make any sense, because those home games against lesser teams, they have to pay the other school.
But their point is that by going to Tennessee, they said that this is why I think the whole thing is crap. They're claiming that they're going to make more money by just having extra home games.
Chance.
Exactly.
No chance.
This is crap. And you've taken the Nebraska fan base and said, hey, for 4 years you get to play one of the marquee teams in college football, Tennessee, and now you're like, no, instead you get to pay full price to watch us play Bowling Green. What was the other? It was Bowling Green.
I forget the other one.
Same
I don't know.
Losers that you don't give a damn about. And this is the biggest problem. And I'll say this to I'll say it to Oregon. I'll say it to Washington. I'll say it to Michigan. You are charging an arm and a leg for these tickets. And you have to do the whole donation thing, and they're bending people over left and right, and this thing is more expensive than ever. And for a lot of these teams, you're giving them maybe 2 or 3 games a year that are worth a damn. Dude, if I was one of these season ticket holders, I wouldn't stand for this one bit.
Well, I think that one thing that is good in this regard is that, like, for example, we had Georgia UMass this year.
Yes.
Georgia UMass. UMass was like 2-8. Mm-hmm. They had just fired their coach. They didn't even have a quarterback. The spread was like 60. 60.
Yeah. Why are we playing
By
that
the way,
game?
UMass covered. Well, we're playing that game because UMass needs the money.
Yeah.
And we're also playing that game because Georgia needs a cupcake.
They just want to win.
Right? So what you have is schools buying and selling games.
Yes.
And sometimes when you're a buyer, you're also a seller. Because, for example, UMass then went and played Western Connecticut and sold it. They were the Georgia of that scenario.
Yep.
So it's a really bad model.
Yeah.
And not only that, but, well, I'll get back to my original point was, I think one thing that is changing that is good is that this settlement and having to pay whatever it is, $20 million a year to athletes, is going to mean that the Georgias of the world will stop playing those crappy ass games because they don't want to pay the $2 million. It was $1.9 million that UMass got to play that game.
Yeah.
They're going to stop playing those games because that costs them too much money.
Yeah.
right? So in one way, that furthers the gap between the haves and have-nots because the UMass can't. They said that was a third of UMass's entire their revenue.
Yeah, that's
it was
why
a third of their revenue.
That's why they do
which
it.
is why they'll go play that game. As a matter of fact, I think UMass, they said, played 3 SEC teams this year.
Yeah, I remember. I forget who it was, but there was a school years ago that played like the number 3, number 6, and number 10 team in their non-conference, and they lost those games by, like 140 combined points. And the guy was like, this is what we have to do in order to stay afloat.
But the thing that's good for fans is, and the SEC and the Big Ten have already said this, is that they are going to play more sort of revenue-driven matchups. And UMass is certainly not. It's not for revenue.
No.
You just want the win. So they're going to stop playing as many of those games, and they'll play more games where they make more money, which is good. The residual problem with that is all the little guys. Where do they get the rev? How do they make up the $2 million they made by playing Georgia?
And they may not. And while it sucks, they may have to go to a different model. You can't keep doing this. Nebraska is replacing Tennessee with Bowling Green, Miami of Ohio, and Northern Iowa. I don't know.
Well, the guaranteed games are all crap games.
Yes.
And fans will not want to come.
Yeah.
And fans don't want to watch.
And yet you still have to pay full price for those games with your season tickets.
But they're right now in the current model, they're a necessity because, again, the bigger school wants the win and the smaller school wants the money.
Yeah.
So what do you do to change that?
I just, honestly, smaller schools, and maybe this is ultimately just, you already have 2 separate divisions, but we can't keep propping this thing up. Who is it? I think it's Joe Klatt that talks about that this new era of college football that we're going into does not, you can't have it live in the same world as the old system. And I feel bad for UMass, but if I'm a Tennessee fan, if I'm a Nebraska fan, UMass is not my concern. And if UMass ultimately can't field the football team, I'm sorry, then go down to the Division II model. Go down to something where, because those schools exist, the Linfields of the world, it just, you can't keep asking fans to go to these games. It's like the Nick Sabans of the world then bitch and moan that the fans leave early. You can't play those games. It is a model that I think is fundamentally broken, and the only reason they get away with it is the, quote, passionate fan base. But when you only have a handful of these games a year, the idea of taking one away that as a fan of Nebraska that you would want to travel to and you would certainly want to go see, and replacing it with a game that is an absolute, it's just an atrocious matchup, I just don't know how you keep getting away with it. As a fan, I would be offended. As a season ticket holder, I would be livid at this.
This is where it starts. When you talk about correcting college football and making it a better product, you have to balance the schedules.
Yeah.
And it starts with this. Did you know there's a company called Gridiron that basically they just match teams? So basically an AD will give Gridiron their considerations for wanting to play a game. Is it money? Is it
they'll match it up.
TV ratings, whatever.
Yeah.
And they'll match them with other schools.
Yeah.
And they'll match games that way.
Yeah.
All of that needs to just go out the window.
Yes.
It just needs to be a more streamlined, balanced schedule that's fair for everyone. And yes, maybe there are going to be some casualties.
Sure.
Like UMass or Oregon State it's just that's the way it is now.
And that's Klatt's whole point. Is the same thing with like the bowl games. You're trying to move into this golden age of football where we're making more money. The athletes are getting a cut of it. The fans are going to benefit from this because of better matchups. All of these things moving in the right direction. And yet you're still trying to hold on to the archaic way of bowl games being so important and playing, the UMasses of the world, one team basically buying a victory. Like if you are a big time team, you can't, especially in the SEC, with a bad non-conference, you're giving your fans basically 3 bye weeks that there's no reason to show up, and then you're probably giving them at least 2 more because there's going to be bad teams in the conference. So you're asking your fan base to pay attention to maybe 3 to 4 games a year, and I just don't see how in any other sport you would get away with that. But college football has gotten away with it for years.
I don't know that they're trying to hold on to it. I think they all know it needs to change. It's just a really big operation that is it's hard to turn that boat around.
Yeah.
It's just, you're talking about in football, you're talking about 125 schools, and that's just at the one level.
Yeah.
So that's a really hard thing to just flip on a dime, you know. So and they're working on it, and we're already getting this with the SEC and the Big Ten saying, "Hey, we're just going to go play each other in these big non-conference matchups to make a bunch of money." But what does that mean for all the other schools that aren't in the Big Ten and the SEC?
And Bartu has talked about this, and he said it for years. It doesn't matter who you play; it just matters wins and losses. And so for a lot of these schools, they look at it not only as a financial thing, but if you have playoff aspirations. I keep waiting for a committee to really punish teams for not playing anyone. And so far we haven't, because we all know that being a one-loss team or being an undefeated team, regardless of what your schedule is, still better than we have to start rewarding people for scheduling real tough games.
Well, I think that's going to change.
I hope so.
Because more of the big schools and big conferences
will get guaranteed
are trying to make money. Yeah, like they're wanting to play these big. It's amazing that you're right. The way to win is just schedule patsies and win all your games. Yeah. But actually, schools don't even care about that. The SECs, Big Tens of the world aren't looking at it that way. They're looking at it, well, we need to play as many good, tough games as we can because that means more money. Yeah. It's all about money. Yeah. And in a residual way, that's good for college football.
Yeah, and hopefully by the expanded playoff or guaranteed spots, hopefully it finally incentivizes teams to schedule big games. And if you lose them, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
But we've lived in a system where losing one game or two games is an absolute death sentence, and that has led to BS scheduling.